Welcome back. It's the 20th anniversary of the reunification between Hong Kong and the Chinese mainland. With us again for this part of the show from Hong Kong, Zou Yue is anchor of CGTN's China 24. Joining us from London, Martin Jacques is author of the best-selling book When China Rules the World, The End of the Western World and the Birth of a New Global Order. And with me in the studio, James Keith is former US Consul General to Hong Kong and currently runs the Asia practice at McLarty Associates. Thanks to all of you for joining us. So, let me start with you. We've had 20 years of this two systems, one country process. How would you characterize the relationship now between Hong Kong and the Chinese mainland?
I should say this is a relationship has been stable most of the time, but not without tests. The relationship between mainland and Hong Kong is actually based on one country, two systems. Let's first talk about one country part. When 1997, China took over from British the sovereignty of Hong Kong, it meant that the Chinese government will practice sovereignty over Hong Kong. And that's the fact that has been there since 1997. But recently, there are some pro-independence separatist urge to separate Hong Kong from China, or even independence urge from the localists. That's something I think Beijing cannot tolerate, because sovereignty means sovereignty. But on the two systems part, on the ground, the local politics in Hong Kong has become some kind of toxic. The opposition's only motivation is to stop the process of the government's functioning. And the only thing that they want is to bring down every agenda of the government. And that's become a very deconstruction process for the Hong Kong politics. I don't think the Beijing government want to see that happening. That's why there is some overreach sometimes from the Beijing side. But there's different interpretations from different groups.
Right. Martin, your book, When China Rules the World, lays out how China has risen as a global power in the last few decades. To what extent has Hong Kong and the relationship between Hong Kong and the mainland contributed to that rise?
Well, I think that certainly the handover in 1997 was a really significant historical moment, because it ended a whole period of, in a way, of the century of humiliation and the loss of Hong Kong to Britain in 1842. So I think it was a significant moment, and I also think it was significant in the way it was done. I mean, one country, two systems was a very innovative proposal. I mean, it's not something that nation states, for example, I don't think China actually is primarily a nation state anyway, but nation states do. One nation, one system. But China is much more complicated and much bigger and much older. So therefore, the innovative proposal, which was a recognition that Hong Kong had a very different history, 155 years of colonization by Britain, was a challenge which would probably best be met by some formula like one country, two systems. Now, so I think that was a really important moment. Now, I think history since, I mean, in many ways, in many senses it's worked, but in some senses it's under stress, it's under difficulty at the moment. And I don't think we should underestimate just how difficult it's been for China and governance in Hong Kong, that you have a territory which is occupied overwhelmingly by Chinese, but who have lived under British rule for 155 years, and they come to, in one way or another, they come to be now part of China, and the extent to which they're prepared to accept it and so on. I don't mean accept it just in word, but accept it in deed, in spirit and so on, and that's obviously proved to be something of a problem.
Right, it is a unique system. James, you were stationed in Hong Kong as the United States Consul General. That's a very senior diplomatic post there. You saw firsthand the one country, two systems process, the framework in operation. What is your assessment?
Well, I would say the one word that comes to my mind is the dynamism of the relationship. I think when Deng Xiaoping said that the Hong Kong system wouldn't change for 50 years and that the Hong Kong people would enjoy their way of life without change for 50 years, he had to do that within the context of both China and Hong Kong changing with the times. And I would agree with the assessment that it was a very creative solution for Hong Kong's handover. In other words, it wasn't an off-the-shelf solution. It wasn't a school solution, as they say. So this is something that I think people should have some patience with, because it's being defined year by year over time in practice. And I think it has gone up and down. There have been better times than others on economic and political sides. But in general, I think there's been goodwill on both sides to try to make it work, because both sides have an interest in making it work.
Right, and Zou Yue, if we look at the sort of international balance sheet right now, there's been a report published by the World Bank. That report says that Hong Kong is more advanced today in political stability, government effectiveness, regulatory quality, rule of law, control of corruption, and accountability. That's a pretty good report, and it says all those things have happened since 1997. How has the relationship with China helped it advance to this stage?
I think the mainland has done everything it could to offer help in all different ways to make sure that the transition is smooth. And in different occasions, the Chinese mainland has tried to help Hong Kong smooth over problems during the financial crises, during the SARS epidemic, let alone the everyday supply of water, electricity, vegetable, and fruits. The Chinese government want to see the experiment to succeed, because this is really a very creative way of uniting the country, and this could provide inspirations for future political and social experiments within China. So there is no reason that Beijing wants Hong Kong to fail. And Beijing has actually tried in every way to make sure that Hong Kong's society and economy function well. And I think it does.
Right, Martin, the President Xi Jinping, is in Hong Kong to commemorate this anniversary. Let's take a listen to part of what he had to say.
The central government has provided a strong backing to Hong Kong over the past 20 years, and so it will in the future in growing its economy and improving Hong Kong people's well-being.
So what kind of impact is the President's visit having on Hong Kong and the people there? I mean, how significant is this visit? Put it into some kind of context for us, that the President himself is in Hong Kong.
Well, I think it's very significant. I mean, this is easily... this is an absolutely key moment that the President of China has gone to Hong Kong to celebrate the 20th anniversary, and it'll be important for Hong Kong, it'll be important for China, and it'll also have a global resonance. So I mean, it's declaring the relationship between China and Hong Kong to be very important. And I agree with the previous panelists that I think, well, I was a great supporter of the solution of one country, two systems. I think it is extremely creative. I think it's very important for China, but it could be very important in global governance. I mean, there's no reason why sometimes it can't be followed in other ways. But I don't think, in having said all that, we should underestimate the differences. I mean, earlier you said to me, you know, China's rise and so on. One of the great difficulties that the relationship has faced is that in 1997, you know, Hong Kong was much richer than China. It had been very successful over the previous 20, 30 years, and China was still much poorer, and its rise was, you know, going hard, but it got a long way to go. And in a way, what's happened in the economic relationship between the two since then is that situation has reversed. You know, Hong Kong has really grown very slowly, 1 to 2%. Meanwhile, China has continued to gallop along at, you know, a serious speed and has become very innovative. You know, if you take, for example, Shenzhen, just over the border, and compare that with Hong Kong, then Shenzhen has been economically, I would argue, a lot more successful, a lot more innovative, for example, in terms of its technological companies based there. And Hong Kong has really labored, you know. I mean, its old economic base is still its economic base, property, retail, tourism, and so on. and they've kind of, to some extent, stagnated, and nothing new, that too new has happened. So I think one of the great challenges looking forward is, well, how is Hong Kong going to become what I would term actually dynamic again, like China is now very dynamic?
James, Martin raises an interesting issue there, and that is the whole idea of one country, two systems. I mean, we live in a very diverse world, and as you pointed out, it's a very creative way of resolving this issue of how Hong Kong became reunited with China. Is there a lesson here for the rest of the world?
I think so. I mean, it's complicated, of course. You really kind of boil it down, I think, and this is evident in President Xi's visit to Hong Kong at the moment, to the two systems differing on rule of law and civil society. And that's, I think, relates to Martin's point about the dynamism of the Hong Kong economy. If you're a technological company and you want to base your servers somewhere, is there a difference between basing them in Beijing or Shenzhen and Hong Kong? That's a question I think that, that they're still struggling to answer, and how they answer that question, I think, will have implications for economic nationalism and emerging economies' view of the role of rule of law and civil society as they develop.
Zou Yue, Martin also made that great comparison between Shenzhen and Hong Kong there, where Shenzhen's growth rate has been much higher than Hong Kong's. Hong Kong in itself has emerged as an economic powerhouse in Asia, at the same time, of course, that China has emerged as an economic power. What is the economic outlook for Hong Kong?
You know, Hong Kong used to be one of the four Asian tigers in the 1970s, riding on the success of manufacturing and trade, and then followed by finance. But that was then, because the change of global economic structure and the rise of mainland's economy. So relatively, Hong Kong has been in decline economically, although it is still ranked as the most innovative economies by IMD, a world think tank. But I think there are some problems with Hong Kong's economic structure. Hong Kong is struggling to find new growth points other than traditional services and finance. I think one problem is vision. Whether Hong Kong has the vision and the courage to get out of the comfort zone, to train a new generation of talents, to join the Chinese mainland in high tech, in services. This is something that Hong Kong has to tackle. And this is not something easy, because the Hong Kong people are comfortable living within their own comfort zone. They are trying to get their jobs in Hong Kong, but that's no longer that possible, because really the job market in here is not that promising. So the chief executive I interviewed, outgoing chief executive C.Y. Leung, said the young people in Hong Kong should go outside of Hong Kong to find a bigger stage and better opportunities. This is not something easy. This is something hard, but that's what they should do.
Martin, what do you see as the major challenges? Should Hong Kong become a little bit more integrated with the Chinese economy?
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, I agree very much with what's just been said. I think that Hong Kong is historically stuck. I mean, not to beat about the bush. I think that, its great period was something like from the 70s to the handover. Why? Essentially, it got lucky. It got lucky because China began to open up, but opened up in stages, and for quite a period like that, really, Hong Kong was the front office for China, where China was sort of the engine. And of course, sooner or later, China was going to open up fully, which is exactly what it did, particularly after 2001 and WTO. Now, in that situation, Hong Kong lost part of its historic role. And it's not been, and unfortunately, I think one of the attitudes in Hong Kong has been, we did it because of our innovative capacities and so on. I don't completely go along with that. I think Hong Kong got lucky. And it's very important that Hong Kong moves on from this stage it's been at, because if it doesn't, it's going to stagnate. It's got, and that involves not less relationship with China, it involves a much fuller integration with China. And one of the difficulties, I think, that Hong Kong's had is because of this reluctance to integrate, it's not actually been able to gain the kind of benefits it could have done by a fuller integration into the economy into the southern Chinese economy. And I think this is an absolutely critical question. I think a lot of the discontent in Hong Kong, is because the economy stagnated. And, you know, it's no point in blaming the Chinese for it. Actually, the Chinese economy is doing very well. In fact, the Hong Kong economy, to me, more resembles that of its old colonial master, Britain, where I am now. You know, it's a mess. It's stuck. And politically, we're stuck in Britain, and Hong Kong is stuck. And so, actually, Hong Kong has got, you know, it thinks now it doesn't have to learn anything from China, or, you know, politically in terms of governance. On the contrary, I think it's got a tremendous amount to learn politically and in governance terms from China, because China is extremely effective. I mean, governance has got great instrumentality in China, but you can't say that of the situation in Hong Kong, I'm afraid.
Zou Yue, one final question. I've just got a little bit of time left. When we look at Hong Kong and the people of Hong Kong, have they over the years developed their own identity, something that is clearly distinct from the rest of China? And how does one change that?
There is some kind of disorientation. I think this is the result of 150 years of colonial rule by the British. I and my colleagues have been talking about this. We make a metaphor. It's like your kid has been sent to a well-off family, and they adopted her or him. And after some years, you take her back. But the biological father lives with the children, but the children has been living in another family, in another system, and he's not so comfortable coming back to his biological parents. But the problem is you have to believe in the good faith of your parents. According to Chinese tradition, your biological parents always have good wishes for their children. He wants them to be good. So I think Hong Kong and mainland should have faith in each other's goodwill. They should make compromises and build consensus. That's what is key to have a really friendly and productive relationship.
Great analogy, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's all we have time for, but